Okay, so let's go for 10 mixing tips that changed my life. So he's going to run you for 10 mixing tips. And to my point of view, I'm going to tell you if that's true or if it's not, or if it's something new that I'm hearing for the first time. So let's run for the video and let's see what he's saying.
Hey guys, these are 10 mixing tips that changed my life. Now I know the title of this video is cheesy, but I promise you, these aren't just any old 10 mixing tips that I threw together to make a video. These 10 tips played a huge role in helping me develop my professional sound, quit my day job, and start my music production career. So if you're looking to develop a sound so professional that you can start making money at it, you won't want to miss any of these tips. Let's get into it. Tip number 1 is to remove the sub-bass frequencies in every instrument besides the kick and bass, even if you don't think there's any sub-bass frequencies in that instrument. Low frequency dirt and mud hides in the most unexpected places, and it's exactly these hidden artifacts that can disturb and add mud to your sub-bass. For example, let's take
I agree. I agree to an extent. I don't think you should cut out everything because certain times, let's say, okay, you cut out, if it's not a bass instrument, you would cut out the low frequencies between below 100, between 40 and 100 hertz. And then sometimes the feel of the instrument lies there. So if you cut it out throughout every single thing, every single instrument, after a while, it started feel like it is missing something. Like it originally when you start to build the project, it feels like it's missing something after a while because you actually took out all the warmth and stuff like that off of the instrument. It depends. It depends. I wouldn't say it's every time. It depends. It depends on the instrument that you're using, right? It depends. But that's a great tip for cleaning up your mixes.
this hi-hat. You would never think to low cut a hi-hat because it's such a high frequency instrument. But if we add an EQ, turn on the analyzer, and play this hi-hat, there's a bunch of stuff here in the low.
He's right. Right there, he is right. So you could see from like the main sound of the instrument starts from about 200 hertz going up, right? So everything below there is basically null and void. So you do not really need anything below there. Especially it's a hi-hat. It's a high frequency instrument. So you basically do not need anything below there.
Frequency range. If you have too many instruments adding that much low frequency dirt to your mix, you're going to lose a lot of headroom and ultimately your sub bass is going to start to sound muddy. So what I like to do is I like to add an EQ. You can use any EQ plugin that you like. Turn on a low cut filter and just cut out every low frequency artifact.
You see, exactly what I said. So he brought it up to 200 and then remove everything below, right? Yeah. But this doesn't apply to every instrument though, right? So as you could see, he used the hi-hat. Since the hi-hat is a high frequency instrument, he used it and then he cut everything below 200.
Effect in between 40 and 80 hertz because that's where your sub bass is the strongest. This type of filter will not take away from the quality of this hi-hat whatsoever, but it'll clear up all that dirt so that your sub bass can breathe. This next tip by far changed my life the most, and that is that you have to understand that there's a lot more people out there that like to sing or make music than people out there who actually know how to mix music. This means that there's a huge opportunity and demand for freelance mixing engineers to earn some serious side or full-time income. Before my success on YouTube and the success of my other projects like my sound banks and course platform, I used to make around $6,000 to $10,000 a month just mixing for people as a freelance mixing engineer. And it was this type of money that allowed me to quit my BS job at an auto body shop and actually focus on music full time. And trust me when I say this, when you can focus on music full time, that's when you really get good at it.
That's true. That's 100% true. Because I did something similar. I left my full-time 9 to 5 to do music full-time, right? And then having more time to spend making music actually makes you way better at making music, right? Yeah, so I agree. I agree with that 10,000%. Yeah.
And not only that, but most artists don't care if you don't have any major credits, like you've worked for Kanye West or Katy Perry or Avicii. They just want to know if you know how to mix a song, and that's all the proof that you need. So you really have nothing to lose. I know I didn't have any major credits when I started my mixing business back in 2016, and it was because I made the choice to step out of my comfort zone and start mixing for people even though I had no major credits or anything, that I was able to break free of my old life and start doing music full time. With platforms like SoundBetter, AirGigs, and Fiverr.com, selling your skills as a musician has never been more accessible. So stop waiting around and get out there and start hustling. My next tip is to use a reference plugin to compare your mix to a professional mix. I like to use Reference 2 by Mastering the Mix. There's just no closer way to reference a professional mix. To use a reference plugin, grab a professional song that's dynamically similar to your song.
That's true though. It actually helps you to get an industry sounding mix, right? It's like a guide, so you know exactly where your bass should be, where your vocals should be, your instruments. Depends on the genre. So you get a professional mixed and mastered song, industry standard song, and then you basically use it as your guide. So then in a plugin like Reference 2, you basically put it in, and then you could run your mix while you mix, and then switch it to the reference, which is the industry mix and mastered song, to compare them. So then you would know if your mix is a bit dull, if your mix is a bit too bright, if your kick is too low, if your snare is too high, if your vocal is too low, if your backgrounds are too high. So you could compare and make the necessary adjustments to get it as close as possible to the industry mix, right? Certain time you might get the levels correct, but you might get the balance incorrect, but the cleaning up, meaning the EQing and stuff like that, needs to be done, right? So you learn you learn how to get what your mix supposed to sound like. You get something that is similar, and then you try to replicate.
I'm going to use cheat codes sex and drag it in to my reference plugin. This song is similar to the song I have here. My reference song sounds like this.
Automatically, if you have mixing headphones, you could hear the difference. The vocal sample in there is already too low. It feels a bit duller, right? Yeah, it feels duller. The vocal sample feels a bit lowered, right? And then I find like the bass is a bit too loud. The bass is a bit too much, or it's a bit muddy or something. That's what I basically could hear from my headphones. Your headphones might be different, but I have on mixing headphones, so I could actually hear the difference.
Now here's the magic of a reference plugin. It automatically gain matches your song with the reference song. So when we play back our song and we switch back and forth to the reference song, they play back at the same volume, so I could clearly hear now discrepancies in my mix versus the reference mix. And just from switching back and forth right there, I could clearly hear a couple discrepancies in my mix. My bass to lead ratio is off, so my bass is too loud. And then also, my hi-hat is dismal compared to the hi-hat in this reference track. So first, let's bring up the lead. Now that the lead's sounding pretty good, I'm going to bring out my hi-hat. Listen to my hi-hat compared to the hi-hat in the reference song. To To make it even more clear, I'm just going to solo out the high frequencies of the reference mix so we can compare that to the high frequencies of my mix. That reference mix is so much more percussive. So I'm going to go back into my mix now, and I'm going to turn up this hi-hat and possibly even enhance it. Let's also boost the hiss on this hi-hat just a little bit. Let's unsolo this high band now and listen to our mix. Now we can clearly hear that my mix is pretty similar to that reference mix. And that's why I like a good old reference plugin. Tip number 3 is to EQ your reverbs. Reverbs are the widest full spectrum sound that you'll ever add to your mix. In other words, reverb is just a big sound that takes up a lot of headroom and can add a lot of mud to your mix without you even realizing it.
It depends on how you use the reverb as well. EQing it is rather important, but another thing that is important is your decay. Knowing the length for the reverb is very important, which is one of the things which kind of muddies up your mix a lot. So knowing your decay times and your pre-delay time and your room size is very important. Dampening as well, if your reverb has dampening. Knowing so you need to learn to use a reverb, not just throwing in. Usually it's always best to throw a reverb on a send or auxiliary channel and then mix it in. It usually keeps your main signal up front, and then the mixing it in actually gives a copy of the reverb to mix with the original signal. So you basically do not lose your original signal, you keep your original signal in there. But using a reverb, the decay times are important, pre-delay, very important, right? Your room size and dampening if there is dampening in there. EQing is good, right? So if you're basically using a vocal, so I would say anything below 100 and anything above 10 or 12K should be, you could shelve out, right? But then still you would get your reverb in between these frequencies, knowing that your decay time, pre-delay time, and room size still affects this portion of the frequency. So knowing these things are important. Quick cheat, like I said, is always good to throw it on a send or auxiliary channel and then mix it in if you are not versed in understanding how exactly a reverb operates.
It's so easy to add a reverb plugin to an instrument and just move on and forget about it, but you have to EQ the reverb. Back when I started mixing, I used to just add reverbs to every instrument and forget about them, and I could not figure out why I couldn't get my songs loud. And the simple answer was, there was too much reverb just going everywhere and taking up too much headroom. Watch this. If we take this funk clap, sounds like this, and we take just the reverb from it, and we look at the reverb under an imager and an EQ, we can see that the reverb emitted from this clap is so wide that it's all over the stereo image. And that's fine. That's what reverb does, is it adds width to sounds. But also look at the frequencies that are emitted from this reverb. It has frequencies all over the EQ spectrum. That is a big sound. We have to tame this.
And understanding how sound works is rather important. If something is close to you, it is usually brighter, right? The further it gets away, especially for reverb, the sound gets duller. You do not hear me as crisp as I sound as I'm here. You hear I sound very crisp and clear than if I'm all over here, right? I do not sound as clear as I sound when I'm closer to you. So the further back you go, the lower the high frequency, the lower the high frequencies goes. So understanding all these things are rather important.
Yes, or else it's going to build up and ruin your mix. Every reverb plugin has an EQ module. On this plugin, this Vintage Valhalla Verb, it's my favorite reverb plugin. What I like to do is low cut filter the low frequencies out of the reverb. This isn't going to ruin the quality of the reverb. It's just going to allow the reverb to fit in the mix. And I like to do it up to 500 hertz. Also, I'll cut out some of the hiss from the reverb by pulling the high cut EQ filter down a bit. And I adjust that to my liking as well. But rarely will I have reverb that's wide open. That's just going to take up too much room. So if we give ourselves a good reverb mix on this snare, it still sounds like reverb, but now that reverb will fit in the mix. For this next tip, try balancing your mix in mono. The problem with balancing your mix in stereo is that there is a lot of what I like to call fake loudness in wide sounds. In other words, wide sounds sound louder than they actually are, and that alone can skew your ability to properly balance mix. Here's a melody that we're gonna play back in mono. Sounds nice, but if I turn this mono switch off and we play it back in stereo, it sounds so much bigger and more lush, but
And to basically hear what just transpired, it's always best to listen. It's better to listen to this on headphones. So you could basically hear the difference in when it's in the stereo space and when it's in the mono space. Right? So having a good pair of headphones on or listening on speakers, which are left and right, close to you, where you could hear the difference. Yeah.
it's not actually louder. It just seems that way. But now what I do to eliminate the illusion of wide, loud sounds is I will go to the master fader of my song. I'll grab a plugin that allows me to put the song in mono in Logic. We just go to imaging and then direction mixer, spread it down to mono. And now my entire mix is in mono. And now I can go through and adjust each instrument accordingly. Yeah, and that alone was like a life changer, especially with drums. That helps a lot with drums. For this next tip, don't mix your song the same day you made it. Your brain and your ears need a break.
That is so true. Because your ears has a natural compressor built in, right? So if you listen to something for a long period of time, your ears usually get fatigued, right? That the higher frequencies, it actually tames the higher frequencies. So you tend to usually mix your stuff even brighter than it's supposed to be because your ears is like filled from hearing so much sound. So it's usually best to take a break, right? And then come back to the mix maybe the following day. Or if you're mixing, you mix for an hour, you take a 10-minute break on every hour to basically reset your ears, right? That is usually a great tip because your ears usually goes into that stage where it gets fatigued and it starts to compress sound. And naturally, you do not feel like you're hearing it, but it's doing it, right? Here's an easy test. You could listen to music on headphones for a long period of time, right? And then stop, and then come back and listen to the same song. It sounds so much brighter and bigger than when you was originally listening to it a few moments ago. Yeah.
After the mental strain of writing music, after endless hours of writing songs in front of your computer, your eyes hurt, your ears are strained, and your brain is fried. You have to give yourself a break because it's this type of exhaustion that will not allow you to hear the dynamics and frequencies of your song correctly, so you're really not going to be an effective mixing engineer. So, next time you write a song, I know you'll be excited to get that song finished and get it out as fast as possible, but just give yourself a break. Go to sleep, wake up the next day, and set up a dedicated mixing session, and I guarantee the results of your mix will be 10 times more lethal than what they would have been if you did it a day earlier on the same day you wrote the song. This next tip is to combine any layered instrument before starting your mixing session. Mixing is a game of organization. The cleaner your DAW is on your eyes, the more effectively and efficiently you'll be able to move through your mixing process. For example, let's take this drum beat, and I'm going to show you how I would set this beat up for a mixing session. This beat sounds like this.
And also it helps with preventing you from always going back and tamper with a sound that has no issue, but you believe that it has an issue. Let's say you lay a sound. If it sounds good, just commit to it, consolidate it, and then if you add an EQ down stuff. If you feel like it needs to be compressed, you compress down stuff, right? If it needs to be the transient, you need to do some transient shaping, then you do that. But when you tend to have many tracks, when you start to get difficulty in your mix, or you start to get sounds that sound a bit more boomy and you go for them individually, you might have that one of these layered sound which sounds clearer, and then the other one sounds a bit darker. So then you tend to cut the lower frequencies from the darker one to mesh with the higher one, and it actually loses the fidelity of the overall layering. So it's always best to consolidate and then basically just commit to it, and then EQ the overall, then it would be a single layer. So you basically EQ and then you mix down everything. It's usually better to do it that way. Preference, I guess.
Take a close look at this, we could see that we have 3 hi-hat layers that are doing the same thing. This is an easy 3 layers that I can narrow down into one single layer. So now what I could do is I could take these 3 redundant layers, get rid of them, and we just took 3 layers and narrowed it down to 1. If we look closer into this mix, we could see that our clap has a layer on it as well.
This also helps with project management as well. So stem mixing. So basically what is it doing? He's putting all his snares and stuff together, so then he gets a single channel. So then it's easier for him to mix, and it's easier for him to basically balance stuff. It's easier for him to balance and EQ stuff on the fly and just go through the mix way quicker than you would have to go through them individually. So all snares are being mixed, all hi-hats are being mixed, because you usually have different sounds blended in there. So everything is being mixed, everything is being consolidated down, basically mixed down into individual stems. So you get a hi-hat stem, snare stem. If it is pods, you get pods. If it is pianos, you get pianos. You understand? And everything is then mixed down, if you understand.
Layers are totally fine. You just don't need to keep all your layers in there and not consolidated. So what I'm going to do is take these claps, right-click them, bounce, in place. And now we have 1 stem instead of 2. So that was just 2 instruments that we were able to take 5 whole layers and narrow them down into 2. But imagine doing this for an entire song and narrowing down all of your layers into as few layers as possible. Your project will end up looking so clean and minimalistic that you're going to breeze through that mixing process and mix like a star. This next tip is fire, and I make my most dedicated students do this, and they always love the outcome of it. And that is to mix one of your songs and then hire a professional mixing engineer to mix that same song. And this will tell you where your mixing skills are lacking and exactly where you need to improve.
So this would apply to individuals who basically have the funds to do it, because a lot of y'all starting out do not have the funds to actually pay a professional mixing engineer to mix and master your songs. So this will basically apply to the individuals who basically have the funds to do it. What I would advise is basically taking your mix and referencing, right? That would be the cheaper version. Just basically reference it on your own and then go through there, right? And then try to get it as close to a song that is basically typically close to your song, right? But this would apply to the individuals who basically have the funds to get it done.
On websites like SoundBetter, Fiverr, or AirGigs, for this example, we'll use SoundBetter. You can go to soundbetter.com, click on this Mixing Engineers tab, and just find a plethora of professional mix engineers with some really great credits that you can hire to mix your song. This dude here is an old man with 150 million streams. He'll probably run your mix through some nice analog gear, so you'll get to hear what that sounds like. We got some dude who mixed for Ludacris here, a Bruno Mars mixing engineer here, Dimitri Vegas and Like Mike over here. You get the idea. Hit up a freelancing website, hire a professional engineer to mix your song. There's really no better way to do it. For this next tip, if you really want to develop the skill of mixing, you have to get yourself a pair of studio monitor headphones or a pair of studio monitors. Consumer grade headphones like Apple earbuds or Dr. Dre Beats are great headphones for listening to music on, but they are not studio grade. Problem with these headphones and any other consumer grade stereo system is that they do not deliver a flat, true sound. These stereo systems add processing to music when you listen to it so that that music sounds good out of that stereo system.
Okay, so basically what it's saying, right? Usually the sound you want to mix on is like this. This is usually best for mixing, a flat sound, right? But industry headphones and stuff like that, consumer graded headphones usually have a curve like this. So the bass is usually boosted and the highs is usually boosted. So it's like this, it's like a curve, right? To give you that perception that you get more bass and then you get more high. So it sounds more exciting, right? But for mixing, this is not really advised because your bass would be way lower than where it's supposed to be due to the fact that it is boosted, right? So when it translates onto another monitoring station, meaning a phone or something else, you do not get as much bass as you heard when you were mixing to begin with. So it's usually best to get mixing headphones, monitoring stations, right? Which has a flat response than the consumer grade, which has the curve, right?
System. The problem with that is that you're not actually hearing what that song sounded like when it left the production studio. Studio monitors like my Audio-Technica ATH M50Xs are the same price as most consumer grade headphones, but they are studio grade and deliver a flat, true sound that is completely unprocessed. So I'm able to hear exactly what's coming out of my DAW, and it just makes the whole mixing experience easier. My favorite studio monitors are and have always been the Yamaha HS8s, and I simultaneously switch between them and my Audio-Technica ATH M50X studio monitor headphones. And
I currently use the JBL 305P, right, as my monitoring headphones. Right. Let me see if I could show you guys this. So this is what I use, right? These are the monitoring. This is what I use for monitoring, right? But I plan to get the HS5s. It's close to the NS10s. So, but you do know the only issue I have with the HS5s is that I think it cuts off at 40 or 60 hertz, so you do not get that bottom end. With these, I get the bottom end. It gives me a perceived bottom end, so I understand. So, but with the HS5s, I don't. So I had to find, but it would give you the mid range that you're actually looking for, especially in mixing for translation purposes. Yeah.
I couldn't be happier with this setup. Here's my final tip. Mix for other people. It's the best way to develop your mixing skill. Mixing is very logical, so it's much easier to approach and practice mixing when you're doing it on a song that's not yours. Am I saying don't mix your own music? No, you can certainly mix your own music, but the problem with mixing your own music is that you have too much emotions wrapped up in the song, so you're not going to be the best decision maker when it comes to mixing that song, and too many emotions make any logical process more difficult. Also, I find that when I mix my own songs, I worry about pointless little details that nobody else is going to ever hear or worry about, and that alone can stifle the overall result of your mix. When you mix other people's songs, you don't hear those little details, so you can focus on the mix as a whole, which is how a mix should be thought of, and that is as a whole. That's the end of the video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it.
Right, so that's the end of the video, like the guy just said. So shout out him. So that's basically it. So take these pointers, run with them, use them every time. You should have taken. You could go back, watch a video, write down those notes, and then try to apply them in your next mix. Even if you do not plan to be a mixing engineer, but when you're recording or you're making music, it helps to guide you as to getting a reference as to how you would want your song to sound like before sending it out for mixing and mastering. Yeah, so it gives the producer or engineer a guide, right? So like, comment, subscribe. I know I took some time before I uploaded another video, the vocal chain video. I will try to upload it this week. So yeah, guys, enjoy.